Hey everybody, so one of my Patreon subscribers had a very good and very important question about my Joker film review. And my first video on this was really just a visceral reaction. I had just come home from the theater, and I just wanted to, because I had such a strong emotional response, I wanted to capture myself in that moment. But the subscriber asked a very good question, which was they said, "Did you like the movie?" And it stopped and occurred to me, like, I never really addressed whether or not I actually liked the movie. So, first of all, the most simple answer is yes. I absolutely did. But that is a conclusion that I came to, liking something versus appreciating it are two very different things. I think it's obvious that I appreciated it in the video, in the first video, but liking it was something that came about later. Like, I'll tell you how the reaction that I had to that movie was so strong that at the time I was between books. I was looking for a new book to read, and I picked Prince Caspian by C.S. Lewis from the Chronicles of Narnia because my brain was so fried by that movie that I just needed a story about dainty British school children running through the woods. Like, I needed something chill and pleasant that I could guarantee would be pleasant to read. Uh, and so anyway, so over time, I had to let the effect of that movie subside before I could say whether or not I really liked it. And the answer is yes. Now, I'm going to go into why I liked it and some specifics, some concepts. I'm also going to talk about some things that I didn't like about it. And I want to say I'm doing this on the occasion of, one, because I wanted to answer that question, but two, on the occasion of the film having just passed $1 billion at the box office, which is a very significant landmark, or milestone, I suppose you would say. So first of all, obviously, spoiler alert right up front if you haven't seen it, although I think it's unlikely that you would be watching this video if you have not already seen it. Anyway, watch the film. I do recommend it. And so, getting right to the point, one of the things, if I were to go into the things that I loved about this about this movie, one of the first things that stood out to me when I was watching it in the theater that I love when movies can be conscious of cliches, and not in the sense of like being literal about it, where a character says, "Hey, don't do that. That's that cliche from that movie." But when they incorporate a cliche a cliche about filmmaking in a very self-realizing way. And what I'm talking about is there's a scene when Arthur sneaks into the theater, the symphony hall rather, that's showing the movie, the Charlie Chaplin movie with the symphony playing along to it. When he goes in there, he goes into that supply closet and gets the little bellhop uniform so that he can sneak through the theater as an usher, unannounced and unnoticed. And what I love was when he did that, the uniform didn't fit. And I love that because it's like, how many times have we seen in movies the secret agent or the espionage guy sneaks into the back room and puts on a uniform, or he knocks out a guard and puts on that guard's uniform, only to have the uniform fit perfectly. And what would the odds of that be? And so, especially with someone like Arthur Fleck, who's extremely physically frail and very small, not a lot of uniforms. He's not the kind of person that would be hired to be in a very physically imposing position like an usher anyway. So, obviously the uniform's not going to fit. So I love that. I thought that was great. And then, to give you a counterbalance, though, one of the things I don't even know if I would say I didn't like it. It was just kind of a suspension of disbelief that took a lot of conscious suspension of disbelief for me, was the way he was being transported by the police after killing Murray Franklin. So the thing is, see, I actually, for 2 years, I worked as a dispatch officer for the police, So if you called 911 in that area, I was one of the people that might pick up. And so I know a little bit about police procedure, especially on the ground response, emergency crisis response actions like that. And I can tell you with utter certainty that you would not have, if you've got somebody that is has confessed to, first of all, confessed to being a mass murderer on live television, killed somebody on live television, and killed somebody on live television, and has a movement in his honor that is out rioting and killing and looting and pillaging in the streets, you would never take that guy in with one police car. that whole thing was just obvious. Like, the minute I saw him in one police car, I thought, something's going to hit the car. You know, another car is going to come hit the police car, and that's going to give him an opportunity to escape. And I was right. You know, because it was just so blindingly obvious that they had to open up that weak spot. It's kind of like when you're playing a video game and you shoot for the flashing red dot on the boss. That's the vulnerable spot. It was so obvious. What would actually happen? Most likely, in the case of someone like Arthur Fleck, most likely he would be gunned down by police. Not as a procedural thing, but just because tensions would be running so high that it's very likely, you know, the police are going to go in there with their guns drawn anyway. It's very likely in a situation like that that he's going to do something, commit some kind of action that is going to trigger, no pun intended, trigger one of the police officers to open fire, just because it's such a high tension situation. Now, the thing is, from a police response perspective, the only thing that probably would have could possibly have kept him from getting shot was the fact that he put the gun down. Like, if he was not holding the gun when they got there, then they would probably give him an opportunity to surrender. If he's still holding the gun, then he's an active shooter, at which point they definitely would have shot him. But anyway, so and then also, when you load him into the car, you're not, again, you have this riot going on in the streets. You're not going to have, well, irrespective of the riot, even without the riot, if you are, if you are transporting a mass murderer, even if they are not just coming off of a killing spree, even if you're not just arresting them in the midst of a killing spree, if you are transporting a mass murderer, you're going to have them in an actual armored prisoner transport vehicle, and then you're probably going to have an escort team around it. So there would be, probably a motorcycle cop, either in the front or on both sides, and there will at least be one more patrol car, if not multiple patrol cars to hem it in. So that part of it, there would be an escort, an actual envoy, to transport him to the holding cell, which would probably be the county holding cell. He would be transported to the holding cell with a full police escort. It would not be one person or one car with two cops in it driving him through the riot that he inspired. So that was kind of, from a quality standpoint, that was really one of the few major gripes that I had. And it was one of those things where, kind of thinking about it, like, well, I thought, well, this is, as I watched the movie, I thought, well, it's obvious why they had to put it in 1981, because it was at a time before there were cameras everywhere, before there were metal detectors everywhere. Because, yeah, in nowadays, the minute he walked into that television studio, the metal detector would go off, and that would be it. Or he would never be suspected of a crime, or not suspected, he would be exonerated for killing those men, because there would be security cameras in the train. They would know that he shot in self-defense, and that would have been it. So those things, though, were not deal breakers for me. One of the things I liked about the structure of the film was the fact that there was this very conscious arc to the tension. As somebody who has dealt with anxiety, I know that panic attacks, anxiety, spells of anxiety, that kind of thing. Uh, if you look, the information shows that they generally last between 10 and 15 minutes, and it's very difficult for one. It's possible for them to last longer, but those are in situations of extreme trauma, PTSD, inducing levels of trauma. But in general, panic attacks have a 10 to 15 minute arc, and what I loved was, as somebody that's sensitive to that, I would watch these high tension moments in the movie, and they would have about a 10 to 15 minute arc. Obviously, I wasn't sitting and watching it, but I could feel like the tension build, and it would come back down. When I say the tension, I don't mean the tension in the movie. I mean the tension that I was experiencing on a visceral level. It would build, peak, and come back down, and the scenes seem to be structured along that arc over and over again. You know, and there would be these moments where it was like it consciously stepped out of that and gave you a little respite before it dropped you back into the next one. A good example of one of those respites would be the kind of investigation part of the movie where he's reading the letter, confronting his mother, going to confront the Wayne family, talking to Bruce Wayne, getting told off by Alfred, going and confronting Thomas Wayne, getting his mother's case file. That, by the way, was another kind of unrealistic thing. The guy's not going to walk up and say, "Yep, here's the case file. Let me read these private medical notes to you." But that whole arc right there was one of the low-key kind of non-tension moments. Whereas the real tension, panic-inducing scenes would follow this arc. A really good example of that was the scene at the end where he kills his fellow performer, and then lets the little person go free for being good to him. The scene where while he's getting cleaned up to go on to the Murray Franklin show. That, by the way, was probably the hardest scene for me to watch personally, just because it's so funny. I found that it was comforting, the scenes where he was the Joker, because when he was the Joker, when he was acting as the Joker, he had the face paint on and he was being that person. Those were actually weirdly comforting. I don't mean comforting in a reassuring sense, but one of the great tensions in the movie is the feeling that is the feelings that you have towards Arthur Fleck. It's kind of like he's kind of a Charlie Brown type character, where it's like, it's just like, God, if he could just kick the football. It's that feeling of like, I just want this guy to get in control of his life. And it's so bad that you're even thinking, yeah, I'm even willing to go along with him turning into a supervillain if that means him having a sense of control in his life. Like, I think that's one of the things, one of the character building elements that they do. So it was actually calming in a way when he's confronted by the guys on the subway and he shoots them, because it's like, okay, oh God, thank God he's finally taking up for himself. At least, there's this. And so those scenes, like the scenes where he was the Joker, were actually not as upsetting to me as the scenes where he's Arthur. And what was interesting, bringing it back around to that confrontation in the apartment, I thought what was interesting was when those two guys confronted him, he had white face, just purely white face, and none of the other makeup on yet. It was just that one layer. And I like that. And you notice how throughout the movie, like the scene where he's on the train doing funny faces for the kid, he has little bits of the makeup still on, so it's like it's saying there's a little bit of the Joker there peeking through. But that was really disturbing to me, and I think part of it was because he just had the one layer on, and it's like the movie was saying, we know that you've been taking pleasure in the scenes with him as the Joker, where he's in full face paint and he's acting like you want him to act. We know you've been getting a sick thrill out of that, and we understand it. And we also know that you're absolutely disgusted and creeped out when he's Arthur. You're severely upset when he's Arthur. So we're going to give you this scene that is morally ambiguous, and it shows Arthur Fleck in a moment where he's neither fully Arthur nor fully the Joker. It's this transitional moment. And if you had not had that, if you had gone straight from Arthur accepts the call to be on the show to that, strutting shot of the Joker coming around the corner, it would not have been nearly as effective, because right there they're saying this is not, as much as you've been enjoying the scenes of him as the Joker, this is not an anti-hero. This is not a good guy. Anyone that's noticing that chair in the background, yes, I have cats. That's kind of embarrassing. Anyway, this is not a good guy. This is not an anti-hero. This is not someone to root for. You have got to now confront the fact that you've been cheering for this guy that is not a good person, ultimately. That no matter how much you sympathize with him and empathize with him, you've got to accept that this is not a good person, period. And so that scene right there, that kind of purgatory, if you will, that midway balance point right there, that was such a disturbing scene, because essentially he kills somebody that, yeah, the guy screwed him over, but does he deserve to die? No. He's not a direct threat to his life. What a sane, decent person would do is say, hey, you fucked up my life. Don't come over like we're friends. What the fuck were you thinking? You would confront him that way. Arthur doesn't have that ability, obviously. But that guy, does he deserve to die? No. Just like, did his mother deserve to die? No. And then, but he still has some rational awareness with the, not that I have a high regard for political correctness, but I don't know what the term, I don't know if midget is a politically correct, acceptable term, but you know what I'm talking about. With that guy, he lets him go, and it's funny because that doesn't seem at all positive or reassuring. That seems more chilling, because it reminds us that Arthur is now acting completely off of his own moral compass, as opposed to a moral compass that is in line with a larger social contract. So that subtlety in that scene, which again was horrifying to me at the time, but the subtlety of it, the character development of it, was phenomenal. So it was things like that that I loved. I went into it, it's funny, even knowing everything I knew about it going into it, I didn't watch a lot of like spoiler videos or anything going into it, but I knew that it was going to be very dark, very disturbing. I went into it with warm, fuzzy, nostalgic memories of seeing Batman Forever in the theater, of watching the Tim Burton Batmans on HBO, of all of that. I went into it of watching Batman the Animated Series as a kid, of watching the Dark Knight movies, all of that, and, it was so not that at all. But I realized that what it was a complete reversal of that. Like just a full 180 reversal of that. We got all of those things. We just didn't get them the way we're used to getting them. We got to see Alfred Pennywise, but we saw this very hostile, gruff asshole. We didn't see the person that's comforting and reassuring to Bruce Wayne. And by the same token, I thought about something really cool now. Granted, the scene between the Joker and Murray Franklin is one of the, you've got two of the greatest living actors of all time doing this amazing scene together. That scene is going to go down as one of those, it's going to be one of those rosebud moments, or something, like one of those great moments in cinema. That was stunning. But I thought about something interesting, which is the speech that the Arthur as the Joker gives. If you think about it, the Joker is one of those villains that's always giving speeches, and it's not just for expositional sake or to tie up a lot of times in especially certainly in comic books and pulp cinema, that kind of thing, you have villains that have to talk for an extended period, usually because the writers, you've got bad writers giving you a poorly structured story, and that villain has to stand there and hold the guy at gunpoint for 10 minutes and talk to explain his fiendish plan, because the story that you've been reading up until this point was badly written and didn't support that fiendish plan. And of course, that's why, again, it's another movie cliche. Why doesn't he just shoot the guy? One of my favorite examples of that is in RoboCop, where the bad guy actually brings a video into a guy's house to make him watch before the hitman offs him. Like, just go. In reality, you know he's going to go in and kill him and leave, and that's it, because the guy's going to be dead. It doesn't matter that he knows the truth or anything. But and RoboCop's a great movie, by the way. But Samantha disagrees. But anyway, where was I on that? Okay, Arthur's speech, where he's talking about, there are so many little things in there that I love. The thing where he says, "You want us to just be good little boys," and like the way he says it in this little boy way, not in a mocking way, but in the way of somebody that is regressed to that level. And he says, that, "How do you know we won't werewolf and go wild?" And the way he's saying it, it sounds like a little boy, that he's regressed in his mind to that little boy that's full of rage and being abused and everything. Going into that is chilling, and he does it, boom, like that. It's like a sweeping arpeggio from Steve Vai. It just goes right by, and it's just beautifully done, beautifully executed, and he's right on to the next stage of this thing, where you see in that monologue that Arthur is realizing what he is, what he has the potential to be as the Joker. It's all clicking together. It's all kind of, he's realizing that he does have the capacity to be this higher thing. And so I love that. I love that speech, above and beyond the scene built around it. I love the little moment when he walks out onto the stage, and he turns to look at the other guests, and he's the Joker, fully the Joker, kind of for the first time there. I loved all of that, but I love that monologue because he goes through this arc. And what I noticed, talking about the Joker and the way the Joker does monologues, the Joker, it's not, the explanations that he gives are not just explanations to support a weak, badly structured story. The Joker is giving explanations to, because he needs to be understood. That's a crucial part of the character, and a crucial part of who he is somebody that is misunderstood, that people don't understand his motives. And, a great example of that is in Batman the Killing Joke, where when Gordon's going down the tunnel, the kind of tunnel of love that's been modified to show images of his daughter being raped and violated, when he's going down that tunnel, the Joker has this great monologue, and it's not enough to drive Police Commissioner Gordon insane. He's also got to know why it's happening, because the Joker on a fundamental level is somebody that cannot deal with not being understood. He's got to have his motives understood. And it occurred to me that we are seeing, if you were, say you were Batman seeing that, you would see a supervillain talking about his plans for world domination, so to speak. But we don't see that. We see this we see levels of fear and uncertainty and self-realization and all this, because we are, for the first time, able to understand the Joker. Because we're not seeing it from Batman's perspective. We're seeing it, or the good guy's perspective, so to speak. We're seeing it from his perspective. We're able to understand what he's trying to say on a visceral level, and that's why the movie has to put us through our paces getting to that point, so that scene is understood, and that monologue is understood fully on a visceral level. We hear it correctly, we intuit what he's saying correctly. Whereas if we saw that same monologue from the perspective of Batman, our response probably would be the same as Murray Franklin of, yeah, whatever, screw you, you weirdo, that kind of thing. So, anyway, all of that I loved. I would give the movie, put it this way, out of 5 stars, I would give it 4.9 for one very specific reason. And this gets into the issue of a sequel. Um, Now, here's the thing. I give it 4.9. Most movies obviously would never get that high, even movies I like. But this one little thing, the only thing that didn't work, that truly, I told you about those things that were unrealistic, but I say I'm willing to overlook that. I don't care. Every movie has things like that. I just happen to know a little bit about that. But the things the thing that did not work for me, I'm sorry, putting him back in Arkham Asylum after he broke free. And, because the thing is, if you truly wanted to satisfy the audience, I think I can say with some certainty, if you really wanted to satisfy the audience, let us leave knowing for certain that he is the Joker. Not only that he is fully realized as the Joker, but also put to rest all of the fan discussions that have been going on the internet about, well, is this the Joker, or is this just somebody that later inspires the Joker? Put all that to rest by letting us leave thinking he has fully become and is fully acting as the Joker. And so that was the thing for me, because reason being, I don't need to see, obviously, I don't need to see him fully realized in the sense of fighting Batman, but just know that he is the Joker and is on the path to being the Clown Prince of Crime. Bringing it back to the Arkham Asylum scene at the end felt like blue balls for me. Like, I would have, put it this way, if that scene had not been there, I would have left the theater knowing that I loved the movie, rather than needing time to calm down and look back on it and reevaluate it. That would be the difference. So, interestingly, that 4.9 could get upgraded to a 5.0 if the sequel, and it's inevitable that there's going to be a sequel. It made $1 billion. Phillips and Phoenix have both said they're on board to do it, so I think it's pretty much inevitable there's going to be a sequel. Anyway, if the sequel is done right, which is, the sequel has got to be, this movie was like 90 minutes of Arthur Fleck and 15 minutes of the Joker. The sequel's got to be 15 minutes of Arthur Fleck and 90 minutes of the Joker. It's got to end with him being the Joker. Actually fully being that. Like, have him successfully pull off the biggest crime scheme in Gotham's history in the movie. You could end, instead of him being on a police car being applauded by 100 people, have him standing high have him standing on top of the searchlight that will eventually be used to summon Batman with the bat symbol. Have him standing on top of that, laughing at the top of his lungs. Have Bruce Wayne, now as a teenager, vowing to avenge his parents' death. I will get you, Joker. You could even do a great parallel where at the end of Joker, Arthur Fleck says, you wouldn't get the joke, it's between me and him. Have Batman or Bruce Wayne say that at the end of the sequel, so that now they're both on the wavelength. The eternal battle has been established. The two foes have been established. Do that. Let us leave fully satisfied. That's what's got to happen. If you did that, then I can overlook this little scene. It's kind of like Rocky wins at the end of Rocky 2, so knowing that, I'm able to overlook the kind of disappointing feeling about him losing at the end of Rocky 1. Whereas I don't know if I would feel the same way if I saw Rocky 1 back when it first came out in the theaters. That kind of thing. That would upgrade it to a 5.0, because then I could finally overlook that. But that's if they do it right in the sequel. And what I'm afraid will happen in the sequel is we will go through another 2 hours of psychological hell, and we'll still only be at Arthur just vaguely kind of sort of realizing that he might be the Joker. And if you do that, I mean, I think if you do that, you're going to see the exact polar opposite reaction that the first film had. The second film will be universally panned, I think, because no one's going to be like, oh, okay, maybe we'll wait and see if there's a third movie to finally see if this character eventually pays off. That's my only real complaint. Other than that, it is a brilliantly done, brilliantly executed neo-noir masterpiece, and I highly recommend it.